Hi, guys. Thank you.
My grandfather, his name is Raphael. I was related to Raphael. So I walk around with these.
But no, it's funny that people always ask me who my favorite turtle is when they come up, because I always ask them, who's your favorite turtle and why? But I always say I love them all. They're like my kids. Both, Peter and I are the parents of the turtles. Love them all dearly. But Michelangelo was the first turtle ever drawn, and so I've always been kind of partial to him as a turtle character. And but Raphael is, I want to do a turtle story where I can really go crazy, go nuts, and take a turtle character to those places you can't do with some of the other turtle characters. I always just choose Raphael, and oftentimes try to team him up with Casey Jones, who's, they're like crazy goofball brothers that when they're not beating each other up, they're beating up bad guys or something. So
Ninja Turtles was actually the first time I ever, not that everybody makes the newspaper, but it was the first time I was in a newspaper. I was in kindergarten, and the Weekly Gazette was coming into our classroom to take pictures, and we were doing Old MacDonald. They came in exactly when we were doing Old MacDonald, and it was like, Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O, and the cameras came in, and on his farm, it was my turn. I said, and on his farm there was a turtle, and then the teacher was like, E-I-E-I-O, and the turtle goes. I was like, Cowabunga, dude! And that picture made the front page. It was a young me quoted saying, the turtle goes Cowabunga, dude.
first I want to say thanks for Rhode Island Comic-Con and for inviting me here. It's a thrill to be here. Actually, my grandmother used to live in Warwick, so I've been here many times, many years ago. But it was a real treat to come back here. I consider the East Coast my home turf. I grew up in Maine. The Turtles' hometown for many, many years was Northampton, Massachusetts. Yay! So anytime we get back to the East Coast to see you guys and hang out and do one of these shows, it's a real treat for us. It's funny what you're just saying about your discovery and your relationship with the Turtles. One of the things I always like to start my panels with is I would not have the coolest job in the universe if not for you guys. And I really appreciate coming out and buying those books, because when Peter and I did the first book in 1984, it was we were quite positive we wouldn't sell a single copy, seriously. But because we teamed up and we formed Mirage Studios in Dover, New Hampshire, because and actually the name Mirage Studios came out of the fact that it wasn't a studio, it was our living room. So it was a Mirage, and we used to have this little tiny TV that half the screen was blacked out, didn't even come in that good. And I had an overstuffed chair that I found at a yard sale, and I used to work off a lap board, and Pete did the same thing. And what's so funny is that when Pete would watch his favorite shows, he liked the A-Team and T.J. Hooker and those shows, which I didn't like those shows as much as he did. So I thought it was my job to annoy him as much as possible while he was watching his favorite shows. And so that was where late one night, after we were counting through all of our rejection letters from all our submissions to Marvel Comics and DC Comics and trying to find drawing work anywhere, I thought to myself, if Bruce Lee was an animal, what would be the stupidest animal Bruce Lee would be? So you have a fast-moving martial artist, a slow-moving turtle, and so I did this sketch. Had nunchucks strapped to his arms, had a mask on, and I put it on Pete's desk, and I said, this is going to be the next big thing, ha, ha, ha. And it got the laugh that I wanted, and studio one-upmanship. He did a sketch to top my drawing, and of course I had to top his drawing. So I thought to myself, well, if one, why not four? And so I did in pencil this posed thing where all four turtles in one of these X-Men group shots, and each one had a different weapon, and I kind of penciled in this logo that said Ninja Turtles. And then when he inked it in, he added the Teenage Mutant part to it, and we looked at this drawing. It was like November 1983. We just looked at it and said, this is the dumbest thing we've ever seen, ever. And as I love to say, we didn't have any distracting painting work going on at that time. So we said, why don't we come up with a story? Because we just, we grew up as huge fans of Jack Kirby, and I always like to mention in my panels that, besides having awesome fans that have given me this awesome job, it's guys like Jack Kirby, and I call them the giants that we stand on the shoulders of. Because if I wasn't, 9, 10 years old reading Jack Kirby comics or Marvel comics and stuff, that was, the decision I made is I'm going to be a cartoonist. I'm going to be a comic book storyteller when I grow up. And I remember proudly telling my parents that, which they returned this horrified look of, oh my goodness, we're going to have one of those kids that never moves out of the basement. But it was our love and passion to wanting to tell and write and draw our own stories. And so with the rejection letters and all the stuff, we were inspired by other self-publishers around this time, guys like Dave Sim, who did Cerebus, Wendy and Richard Peeney, who did ElfQuest, and there was a real neat movement of self-publishers. So we borrowed $1,000 from my uncle. I had a $500 income tax return, and Pete cleared out all $300 that he had in his bank account. We had just enough money to print a black and white, two-color cover comic book that we could print 3,000 of them. Actually, we could print 3,000 of them, and we had $145 left over to put one ad in the Comics Buyer's Guide to let people know we'd arrived. And we were so sure. I remember when we picked up, we lived in Dover, New Hampshire at the time, and I remember we picked up the books from this local printer. And actually, funny anecdote, you know the first 4 issues of the Turtles are much larger in size? Yes. That was actually an accident. We found this local printer in Dover, New Hampshire, where they printed one of those, it was like a TV guide, like a newsprint TV. It was called TV Fax, and they would leave them outside of convenience stores back in those days, and it was exactly that size. And so we went up to the printer. We said, we want to do this as a comic book. He just printed them the way his printing system was set up. And when we went to pick them up, we said, it's not small like a comic book. It's supposed to be smaller. And he's like, well, you didn't tell me that. So he said, well, this is kind of cool. So we kept them that size till a lot of people complained they couldn't find bags for them around issue 4 or 5.
I wanted to take you back to that time in your life.
Sure.
Like the 19-year-old Kevin.
He was thinner. Much thinner.
I mean, can you paint a picture for us of like what was going on with your life that year, or what can you paint a picture for the 19-year-old Kevin?
Absolutely. I was graduated high school and just drawing all the time, to great annoyance to my parents as well, because I wasn't doing my chores and doing that kind of stuff. And even through high school, I got a lot of great drawings taken away by teachers, when I should have been paying attention in English class or math class, and I was doing drawings instead. But I just loved it, and that's all I wanted to do. It's all I talked about doing. It's funny, we were talking about jobs earlier, because I worked every kind of job, from hospital kitchens to delis to all kinds of stuff. But I always chose the restaurant industry, because in a restaurant, typically you can eat while you're at work, and then I'd actually have money left over so I could buy art supplies. It worked out great. The best job I ever had, around the time actually Pete and I created the Turtles, I was 21. I had a regular daytime job at a restaurant called Horse Feathers in Dover, New Hampshire. But then I had a part-time night job at the hotel, and I also in Dover, New Hampshire, and I had the graveyard shift from 11 to 7. And it was great because I just sat at the front desk and had to wait for people to come in, and in the meantime I could draw. So I just sit there, get a lot of drawing done on those jobs.
That's pretty amazing. That's amazing that you were doing what you had to do, to get through life, and you do what we all have to do, but you still had time to work on developing an art. Developing something that you were passionate about.
Yeah, that's like we were talking about earlier too. It's hard too, because I met some of you fans, and some fans come up and they have drawings, and they're trying to pursue their own artistic, dreams or writing dreams, and it's hard that, I appreciate the commitment, because I share the same passion but it's, if you have a job, you got to pay your rent. If you have a significant other, there's life you have to deal with and pay for, and then to find time to be creative sometimes it's exhausting, and respecting anybody that struggles and is succeeding at it, because it's a tough gig, and but the only way you're going to get better at what you do, whether it's music or writing or drawing, and so drawing all the time. And actually that was one interesting thing we talked about when I was in high school. One of my big influences was this art teacher that I had in high school, which is one of the few people. Her name was Jane Hawks. I still keep in touch with her. Wow. She was one of these great inspirations where when I told her that I wanted to be a cartoonist, I wanted to draw comic books, she's one of the few people that not only didn't laugh, but told me also, she said, well, that's good. Well, from what I know about comic books, you have to be able to draw everything you see. If you want to draw a story that might have a person sitting on a stage in front of an audience, talking, then not only do I have to draw everything in this room in perspective, I have to be able to draw this microphone, this bottle of water, the chairs, everything you see, and people in different shapes and sizes and all that. And so she would give me this extra work in my sketchbooks, and she said, I want everything but superheroes. I know you like to draw superheroes, but I want pictures of your living room couch or the car in your front yard or a coffee cup or stuff, because you have to be able to draw all this stuff to be able to tell a story, because there's so much work that goes into a comic book. So
That's awesome.
So to me, I wanted to take it, obviously, I want to take it on the standpoint of passion. You're such a huge fan of Jack Kirby. And I had the pleasure of meeting Peter about a month ago.
He's awesome.
He's fantastic. And he declined my compliment, and I hope you don't. I always consider the holy trinity of comic books to me as a whole is there's Bob Kane, Bill Finger, there's Jack Kirby, there's Stan Lee, and there's Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird. And I really believe that, because Peter was like, well, what do you mean? He goes, how can you put me in the conversation with Jack Kirby? It doesn't make sense. I liken it to Jack Kirby and Stan created a universe. And that's exactly what you guys have done with the Turtles. It's gone from such a small independent press to one of the most known properties in the entire world. And it just...
Well, that's all their fault.
It is.
So it's really hard, because it's incredibly humbling. I mean, that's someone came up to the booth just this morning and gave me a copy of a project that he had written and drawn, and it was his first book, and he said, you're the one that inspired me to write and draw, and I just, it's one of those compliments that I'm so grateful and humbled, and it still takes me by surprise, because that is literally the first thing I said to Jack Kirby when I met him. Actually, let's give it up for Peter Laird, by the way. 'Cause, I love the man. It's like, the Turtles wouldn't exist without, Peter Laird. And in fact, the first time I met him, I was actually trying to sell some of my cartoons to a magazine that was published in Northampton called Scat, and I found a copy of this magazine on a bus. I was riding, I had a job bagging groceries at Price Chopper at the time, and I was riding the bus back and forth to work, and I found this copy of this magazine called Scat, went to try to sell them some artwork, and they were like, well, we don't really do that stuff that much anymore, and we don't pay anything for it, but, man, your artwork's kind of like this other guy that lives here in Northampton named Peter Laird. You should meet him. And I was new to the area. I didn't know anybody. So back in those days, I actually wrote him a letter, and he responded in a letter, said, yeah, come by my studio. And he had this studio that was about as big as this table that he lived in and drew in. And I walked in to a studio for the first time, and there was a Jack Kirby penciled page. It was a page that it was not unpublished. It was for the Losers comic. And I'd never seen a Jack Kirby original before, and I literally almost passed out. And that's where Pete and I really bonded immediately over Jack.
I want to ask you about your relationship with Peter at that age, at least for both of you guys, because it seemed like things it meshed well, and you guys were able to build something solid and work off of each other and with each other. So I'm interested in that dynamic at that stage, and how that developed.
It's a great question too, and because back in those days, we're pretty, it was pretty common that you'd have a writer and then a separate artist, and to me with Jack Kirby, and very similar to Pete, was that what I loved about Jack Kirby is that especially for the period that I discovered him in, which was the DC Comics period. We went from Marvel to DC. And in fact, Jack Kirby's Commandy, The Last Boy on Earth, was my favorite all-time comic book. I still want to do a Turtles Commandy crossover. It's perfect. I mean, the mutant animals, that's really was the inspiration for Mutant Turtles in many ways. So people would ask, they come up to the signing and to see Peter and I sitting there and say, all right, who writes and who draws? And we go, well, we both write and we both draw. And we had slightly different styles. And Peter is actually a much better artist than I was, and probably still am. So what we did is we would talk out a story together. I would write it out in longhand, usually on a yellow legal pad. And then Pete liked my layout style, so then I would break the story down into layouts. And then from that, we would literally, because we were sitting in the same studio, we'd literally pass the pages back and forth. And so make the styles meld, especially in the early issues. We kind of had this rule that, say if I started on a particular page, I could ink certain parts of different panels, and then to get his style on it, he would go pass it on to him. He'd do some more work on it. We keep passing it back and forth. So the first issues 1 through 11, plus the 4 individual turtle one-shots. The first 15 issues were pretty much done passing the pages back and forth. And it is pretty weird how the styles kind of melded like that.
Wow.
It was just
It's almost
lucky.
seamless the way that you guys did the original run. I'll be honest with you, a lot of times people will show me Peter Laird's art and they'll show me your art, and sometimes they can't tell the difference.
Yeah,
Because it's just like, it's like brothers doing the same thing, you know what I mean? It just, the styles went together so great.
Thank you.
There's a quote that Peter was telling me, and I want to know if that was true. When I met him, he said, you guys were so unsure that you were so sure that you weren't going to sell any copies, that you were going to be burning them for the winter to keep warm. So did you guys just scrimp on winter clothes, and then you were like, damn, we can go buy clothes now?
Yeah, it's two things. That was one of the things we actually were concerned about. But we were very smart, though, in that when we got the boxes of books from the printer, we actually made furniture out of them. We used stacks of books, so we had a Turtles issue number 1 end table, coffee table. We stacked around the office. We were using them because we were like, okay, where do we put all these boxes in our little living room studio? But then guys started buying them, and I think we ended up selling out of the first issue in about a month, maybe 3 weeks, and we were like, can't believe that. And then we still got some orders. So we did a quick printing. Second printing was 6,000 copies. But the first issue came out in May of 1984, and I was still, my summer job was I cooked lobsters on the coast of Maine up in Kennebunk. And so I finished, we released the first book at a very small comic convention in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And then I went back to work for the summer from Memorial Day to Labor Day, butchering lobsters for the tourists. And then people, one of the most often asked questions like, when did you know this was going to be a big hit? And I always point to specifically the second issue of the Turtles, because fall of 1984, Peter called me and said, I'm getting all these calls from these comic book stores that sold the first issue, and they want to know when we're doing a second issue. And we were both sort of like, well, we never thought the first issue would sell, so we never even thought about doing a second issue. And so we started working on that in September of 1984, and when we got the orders in for the second issue, it was 15,000 copies, and we were stunned. And for a couple of reasons, the main one being Peter, did this quick calculation. He said, if we did like 6 of these a year, we'll make about $2,000 each pre-tax on each issue. We can eat all the macaroni and cheese we want. We can pay our bills, and we can draw comic books for a living. And we can be Jack Kirby. And that to me was when the dream came true. Is like I stopped working all of the side jobs. Pete did the same, and we were. So I say January of 1985 was when the biggest thing that ever happened for me in the Turtles history was that I got to draw comic books for a living thanks to the Turtles.
I just watched the Turtle Power documentary, and I loved it.
Thank you.
I loved it because it puts everything in perspective. And it's an amazing. Everybody seen the Turtle Power documentary?
Yeah, seen it.
Oh man! If you haven't seen it, definitely go check it out.
Those guys are awesome. As Randall Lobb and Isaac Fisher, they basically they used their own credit cards. They used their own money. They worked on that for 5 years, basically going around. It was a passion project to them. So like they would just beg, borrow, and steal.
It came out marvelous.
They filmed like 200 hours worth of footage and all this stuff, and then edited 200 hours down to like 100 minutes.
One thing I took away from it that I loved, I didn't know how many different people played a role in the overall impact. For me, it all happened at once. I was a kid. It was like we had a movie, we had television, we had toys. For me, I had it all at once. I didn't know like Cowabunga Dude was made way later. So I was just like, man, somebody made Cowabunga Dude. Wow, somebody added pizza. Wow, so they just added texture to these characters. So it's just like, for you and Pete, like, it must have been an interesting, like, or a scary process to be able to have something you guys were passionate about and that's something you loved, and putting it in the hands of other people and allowing them to not to reinvent, but to add to the story and make it be absolute.
Well, that was, we were so, again, very lucky and very cocky as well at the time because, we could pay our rent. We didn't need to, we didn't need whatever Hollywood was offering us. They said, we can do this with this. And we said, no, we won't take money up front to have you take it away and do what you want with it. we want full control. And even like pizza, where did pizza come from? I worked in a pizza place. That was my after job. You know, as in high school, that was my after school job. I was like, what are teenage, you know, you're talking about an absurd idea like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and they're teenagers, what are they going to eat? Pizza. So I said, so we get to throw that in. Things like Cowabunga. They said, well, they need a battle cry. And we worked out a bunch of different, you know, this and that. And I remember,
still say Cowabunga, dude, to this day.
but I was like, I got that from, they used to do, I grew up in Maine, so to me, watching those old beach blanket bingo movies with Annette Funicello and Frankie Avalon, and it's like, hey, hang 10, Cowabunga, dude. It's like, what are they going to, Cowabunga? Actually, funny, you guys know who Chuck Lorre is?
Yes.
2.5 Men. You know, he wrote the theme song for the original Turtles cartoon.
Oh my God, I did not know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's like, it was, you know, it was one of his early jobs. He wrote that. I mean, that was like, he sent 2 or 3 different ones. One was kind of this Western theme one, which is really weird. But he sent that, and we, you know, so we worked on the voices. Every aspect of the creation, we get to be part of and have say over, you know, right into, like, even with the first Turtle movie, one of the first proposals we got for a movie was Roger Corman, who's like the king of the B movies and C movies. He had this idea, it was this proposal, I still have it, and it was Sam Kinison, Bobcat Goldthwait, Billy Crystal, and Gallagher were going to paint their faces green and wear these shells, and they were fighting these, the ninjas were like these scantily clad ninja nuns on roller skates, and it was this whole twisted proposal. We just looked at it like, what?
Dodged the bullet there.
We said no. But then we were approached by Golden Harvest, who produced the Jackie Chan movies, and they said, you know, the right stunt actor and the right, you know, makeup person, you know, can come up with the prosthetics. And we were very scared at the time because we didn't think, you know, look, doing a comic book is easy because it's drawn. A cartoon at that time was all hand-drawn. Toys are 3D adaptations of the comics and the cartoon. How are you going to pull those off in live action? And that's when we met director Steve Barron, who brought in Jim Henson. And then it was like, all was well in the world, because it was like, Steve Barron came in the first meeting and he had gone through, we had these large 600-page hardcovers of the original stories that Pete and I did. And he'd gone through and had like post-it noted different sections of the comic books. And he said, this is, the sole stories here. It was like Turtles 1, Leonardo, and issue 10 and 11. That's where the whole basis for that first movie came from. And then it was like, all right, how would we bring these to life? And Steve had worked with Jim Henson on the Storyteller episode and some other ones. And he said, I showed it to Henson's Creature Shop, and we believe we can make this happen. And they did. I mean, they, you know, not only did they, the sculptures, the prosthetics, a lot of the animatronics that were done to bring, you know, all the movement, the acting with the guys in the suits to where it was invented just for the movie. And we were even more lucky in that back in those days, because you know, it was so cumbersome, the technology to make all those servers and everything work, is that they were turtles and they had a shell. So you look at some of the scenes where there's lots of talking, you see the shells are even a little bit bigger, because these poor actors that were not only wearing an 80-pound suit also had this big battery thing with all this computer stuff in their shell.
We actually had the pleasure of meeting Leif Tilden and Michelin Sisti.
He's awesome.
And we did not understand how involved their process was, as much as any other method actor, but they had to go through like 7 months of martial arts training. And then we're thinking, okay, so you have Corey Feldman and everyone else doing the voices, and they said we mouthed every single line as if we were saying it ourselves, because we would have been lost in the thought process. I mean, you have to.
Those guys, yeah, they were like, you had to have that, you know, because that's the acting you see on screen. Those guys did a fantastic job. Even Ernie Reyes Jr. was Donatello in the first movie. He wore the Donatello suit and then came out to be Kino in the next movie. But they had two sets, like even all the training and all the awesome stuff that those first set of actors did, they still had a second set of actors that were from Hong Kong. They were stunt guys that would, you know, normally be in Jackie Chan movies and other martial arts movies, wearing those costumes and all those flips and spins and psych, all that stuff those guys did. It was like, you know, some actor in there. And we were on set quite a bit for that. And those things were so hot. It's like they'd shoot a scene under these hot lights, and it was we were filming in Wilmington, North Carolina in July, you know.
Oh, man.
So we're talking like almost 100 degrees with almost 100% humidity, and they'd film a scene, and you could see the turtle actor, he's like starting to fade.
Oh my
Like
goodness.
somebody runs over, and they had these special hair dryer kind of units that blew cold air, so they'd run over and jam this hair dryer in the mouth of the turtle, the sun turtle, and try to keep him alive.
In the documentary, the Turtle Power documentary, you guys have footage of you guys on set of the film, and you guys look like a bunch of turtles, man. You guys had so much fun. It looked like a bunch of friends, and watching you guys react, seeing that footage of Steve with the ooze, like joking around with it, I was like, yo, this is awesome.
Well, that was
footage.
that was so weird. It's like they brought the second, from the black and white comic books, they brought the second time around shot to life, and so we were just walking around in like something that you drawn,
That's awesome,
years
man.
earlier. And actually, that was one of my great funny anecdote from the first movie was we were on set and they asked me if I wanted to do a cameo in the movie. They asked both Pete and I if we'd do cameos, and Pete's like, nah. And he's very shy and awesome, but he's very shy. And so I said, yeah, heck yeah, I want to do one. And so the scene was towards the end of the movie, there was a setup for the garbage truck, which ends up crushing Shredder at the end. So the scene was, it was like two turtles fighting and exchanging dialogue and a few comedy things, and then behind them was Leonardo fighting, I think, about 9 ninja guys. And then kind of down the street just a little bit, this garbage truck appears, but you see this garbage man come walking out, and the scene was set up so that he looks down the street, sees what's happening down there, drops the 2 garbage bags and runs back. And then the garbage truck comes down. So I'm thinking so they put me in, I was Ernie the garbage man, so I had a full one suit thing with my name on it. They put me in makeup and did all this stuff, so I did the scene, and I'm thinking there's gonna be some great close-up of me and so I tell everybody I'm in the movie, and I do this scene, so we're at the premiere of the first movie, and it's like, if you ever seen it, it's like, looking through all the stuff, you see this little black shape. That's me. You couldn't tell who it was, and so it's like telling people I was a stormtrooper, so whatever. It was that bad.
So we're going to open it up to questions, and we have our very own April O'Neil.
Hey, April.
Hey, April.
Hi, the Turtles Forever animated feature I thought was phenomenally well done. It blended together so many different versions of the Turtles. I was in like nerd heaven when I saw it. I was wondering, how did that come about, and were you blown away with the process of seeing that come together?
I love that movie. If you guys haven't seen Turtles Forever, it's actually phenomenal. And it was, at that time, I was not directly involved in the creative. That was all, Peter was doing all of the Turtles Fox Kids series, the 2000 series, which I love. I thought it was this nice edgy version of that. And so Lou Feingold and Pete were doing a lot of creative on this stuff, and Lou came up because they knew the series was ending and they wanted to do this movie. And so they came up with this idea, and then they wanted Pete and I to do this little voice thing at the end. I don't know if you saw that, the little live action thing. And so he called me and said, this is what we're going to do. And I'm like, dude, that's either going to be the coolest thing ever, or it's going to just be terrible. I mean, you got to tread that, so carefully to mix all those turtle universes. But if you can pull it off, and of course I'll be part of it in a heartbeat. And I thought it was fantastic. They really, everything melded together great. And it was neat how it, came together and worked out. So
Thank you.
Glad you liked that. Let's order some food.
All right. Where's the pizza?
Pizza for everybody.
First, a suggestion. If you could bring back a rock version of the Ninja Turtles theme song instead of the rap version in the new series. Okay, anyway. And second off, why did you move from Cowabunga to Booyakasha?
That was kind of a double-edged, it was kind of a political thing in some ways, and other ways a creative thing, because what I love about what Ciro Neely did with the new animated series is kind of the very same approach, because most of the time I work on the IDW comic series. That's what I've been doing the last 5 or 6 years, is working with the incredible Tom Waltz, who's the head writer, and Bobby was creating this universe in each of those. Like we have the IDW universe, which is edgier and geared towards more of the black and white kind of style comic books that Peter and I did with the animated series. It was kind of picking and choosing bits of the original black and white comics, bits of the original More Call Me Wolf animated show, some of the movies, and making a new universe to tell stories from. And we do the same thing in both, that we could pull characters from all those universes into into these stories and create new ones. And so as we built this new story, it was like everybody said, well, Cowabunga is the classic, but maybe we can come up with something really cool. And Ciro was a big fan of Ali G. And so he said, what about something funny like Booyakasha? And we were both like, yeah, that sounds really funny, especially when Greg Sipes, who plays Michelangelo. But I think they ended up bringing back Cowabunga into the new series. But we stole it from Annette Furnicello anyway. So.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thanks. Good question.
Before the next question, so we have other turtle creators here, past, present, future. Make sure you guys check out Ben Bishop if you get a chance, because he is so talented. And I think the IDW series is the best incarnation in a very long time. So.
Yeah, I don't like Ben because he draws turtles better than me.
They're
I love
really
Ben's
cool.
work. He's fantastic. That's a cool part of the IDW series is getting to work with like guys like Ben, who is just absolutely fantastic. Mateus Santa, and you know these guys are.
And they have such love for it.
Yeah, and they really, it inspires me so much to work harder.
Next question.
Yeah, going on that, the IDW series is phenomenal.
Thank you.
I will only buy the covers that you do.
Oh, thank you.
I think it's just the fact that you, 30 years later, are still doing it is incredible. And like the 2014 annual that you did all the interior art for is one of my favorite books ever.
Oh, you're so kind. Thank you, really, sincerely.
So I guess my question is that you kind of answered it. Other than the comics, do you really have any like authority or any creative part with the new series, the movies? And like kind of as a second part just to it, regardless of what you think of the movie, how cool was it to see Bebop and Rocksteady in live action for the first time?
Yeah, no, it was. That's a really great question, and thank you. And no, what's great is like, when Viacom bought the Turtles and was going to go ahead with the cartoon show and the movies and the IDW comic, they brought me in to consult, and it depends on the level of willingness to the people I'm working with. Like on the movies, for example, I had the least input. I spent a lot of time talking to them about what they should do and what they should not do. With Jonathan Eastman, especially on the first movie, who sincerely set out to he said, I want to make the best turtle movie ever. But sometimes studios have different ideas of what that is, and sometimes they have no taste or creative skills. So I gave a lot of input, but it just ended up the way it did. With the animation show, with much respect and love to Ciro and Peter Hastings and the guys over there, they basically call me Obi-Wan. I go to the studio and I'm not in an official capacity, but they like to show me what they're doing and talk about it. In fact, I was joking, when I was talking about Ice Cream Kitty, they were showing me some of the new characters they were doing, coming up with for the latest season. They said, we want you to, because they wanted me to do a voice of either a new good guy or a bad guy or something. And when they showed Ice Cream Kitty, I was like, I want to be Ice Cream Kitty. And they were like, haha, funny. No, seriously, we'll come up with something cool. They said, no, I want to be Ice Cream Kitty. I want to wear a shirt that says I'm Ice Cream Kitty and make my poor wife Courtney wear one that says I'm with Ice Cream Kitty and stuff like that. But those guys, it's in great hands, but they always talk to me about what they're doing, and I can throw in my 2 cents. But the IDW series is the most direct hands-on. Tom, who's the genius, I always tell people I want to be Tom Waltz when I grow up, because he's so fantastic of a writer. He doesn't overwrite, he doesn't underwrite, he creates a great foundation for to tell stories for, so that's more direct. I work at IDW. We have, twice monthly in-mind melt sessions and stuff, but it's fun. So the comics, it's great to me that I have that involved in the comics, because that's where I started, and that's where I'm glad I'm back doing. So,
thank you.
Thanks, great question.
This is one of my colleagues. He's supposed to be over there filming, but.
Hi, how you doing? I'm actually from Northampton, and growing up in Northampton, you were a local legend.
Oh,
and
I love Northampton.
Yes, when as a kid I used to write scripts for the Ninja Turtles, and
awesome.
I would visit the Words and Pictures Museum quite a bit at the Roundhouse, and then when I moved to Main Street, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and any plans in the future for Northampton.
We love Northampton. Actually,
Pizza shop at least?
What's that?
A pizza shop? A pizza shop?
They got
Turtles
Pinocchio's. Pinocchio's on Main Street is really good.
I love Pinocchio's. Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah. No, it's we still have a lot of friends and family. My niece just got married in Florence, so we were just back in East Hampton, Northampton, in early October. But no, we loved him. That was actually because we were always very partial. In fact, Bill Mueller, who owns the Art Guild, the art store downtown, he was the editor at Scat Magazine that told me I should meet this guy, Peter Laird, and gave me his address. So I love to see Bill when he's in and around. And when we could afford to live, support ourselves through our drawing, we moved back to Northampton. That became home of the Turtles. And I still think of it as, we moved back there in 1985. But no, I love the Valley. I love that area. Get back there as often as we can. We still have family in Maine. And when the Turtles became successful, one of the things that, I remembered growing up, I mentioned the horrified look on my parents' face when I told them I wanted to be a cartoonist. And they were like, oh, comics isn't a real job. You'll never make money at that. You're going to live in the basement. And a lot of people I met early on when I told them I wanted to be a comic book artist, they laughed at like, oh, we got one of those kind of people. I said, no, and they said early art teachers were like, well, that's not really an art form, it's a comic book. And I'm like, you ever try to draw a comic book, instead of spattering paint on a canvas? It's a lot of work, and I look at this as a real art form. And so with the success of the Turtles, what I wanted to do was open up a museum that showcased what I think as art, and show it in a real museum setting. And that was my dream for Words and Pictures, and I miss that place very much.
I had friends who worked there. I used to get lost within the artwork, and just before work or after school, I just go, yeah.
It was great,
amazing.
and you could see, like when you real museum experience, you'd go in there and you'd see, the original artwork from people that sit there and draw these things. And I'm very lucky that I work for IDW, as I mentioned. They just relocated offices about 18 months ago, and part of their thing when they moved was to open up a gallery, a comic art gallery. So I curate the gallery in San Diego now, and it's a blast. It brings me as close as I can come to the Northampton Museum as it can be. In fact, I recreated my studio there. It's actually my real studio. It's there as part of the gallery, and we get to do some great shows. But thanks.
Awesome.
Great to see you.
Thank you.
So we're huge fans of the 2012 cartoon, and you mentioned your Ice Cream Kitty cameo several times. She would like to hear your best Ice Cream Kitty impersonation.
Well, it's hard to get into character. When I first did that, I lived with a family of cats for a month. It's really just the method acting down. But no, it was like, that was the thing, is like they asked me to do this voice, and again, they were serious, like, no, we'll find something cool. And I'm like, I thought Ice Cream Kitty was the coolest thing ever. So we went up and recorded this stuff, and it was just like, But I love Ice Cream Kitty, and in fact, it's funny, so funny that people have responded to it, and I hope they make. I want like an Ice Cream Kitty plush toy or something. It's like,
we were going to ask that before you even mentioned Ice Cream Kitty. So
yeah, I would love that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My friend Carly said, Carly Wynn, she mentioned a Turtles exhibit being open in Springfield, Massachusetts.
Yes, thanks for bringing that
wow.
up. That's just opened, I think, this past weekend.
That's awesome.
It's from one of the. Thanks for bringing that up. There was we call him and I think he's actually on the Turtle Power documentary. He's we call him one of the super fans. His collection of turtle stuff, like, he's got more stuff than I do, and I have a lot.
So
but they
it's a collection
showcase
of different memorabilia.
Yeah,
Oh,
so it's
man.
memorabilia and artwork, and he's
That should be fun.
fantastic.
We gotta make
so.
that trip. I gotta make that trip.
Absolutely.
Well, listen, Rhode Island, we are absolutely thrilled to be here. Super excited to share this weekend with you all. Can't thank you enough for coming to the panel and listening to me without
Thank
even
you,
without
guys.
the slideshow. I hope it was Thank you, April, for your help.
Give it up for the guy who's closest to Jack Kirby.
Yay, and Peter Laird. Yeah, say hi to Steve Levine downstairs, too. He's, Oh, okay. The official Rhode Island exclusives. Thank you, by the
4
way.
hamsters. I named them after the turtles. My mom wouldn't get turtles, but she got me hamsters. But they all got turtle names, though.